Hey there, night wanderer. Tonight we're going back, way back, to a time when love wasn't something you chose. It was something that chose you, or more accurately, something your parents, your priest, and your local livestock appraiser decided for you were stepping into the Middle Ages. A world of stone castles and dirt roads, of plagues and prayers, of dowries measured in goats. And tonight we're going to talk about something that might surprise you. Dating, or rather, the complete and total absence of it. Before we begin this journey together, if this kind of storytelling brings you peace, if these old tales help you unwind and drift away, feel free to like this video and subscribe to the channel, but only if it genuinely brings you comfort. And let me know in the comments where you're listening from and what time it is for you. It's always strangely comforting to know who else is out there, falling asleep to the whispers of history. All right? Settle in. Let your shoulders drop. Uncross your legs if they're crossed. Let your hands rest wherever they feel natural. And as we ease into tonight's story, let the modern world fade away. Just for a while. Just for tonight. Imagine this. You're standing in a medieval village. It's early morning. The mist hasn't lifted yet. It clings to the ground like a blanket. Soft and grey, you can hear the distant clang of the church bell. One toll, two, three, marking the hour. Somewhere nearby, a rooster crows. The sound cuts through the cold air. Sharp, insistent. You're 16 years old, maybe 17. Old enough to marry, old enough to be useful. You're standing in a small stone room. The walls are damp. There's a narrow window. Just a slit, really, that lets in a sliver of pale light. The floor is dirt, packed hard from years of footsteps. In the corner, there's a straw mattress, a wool blanket, a wooden chest that holds everything you own, which isn't much. Downstairs, you can hear your parents talking. Their voices are low, serious. They're discussing you, your future, your marriage. You press your ear to the gap in the floorboards. Your father's voice rises slightly. He's talking about land, about a neighbor's son, about a dowry. Your mother murmurs something you can't quite hear. Then your father again, firmer this time. It's decided. He says, by summer, you straighten up. Your heart is beating faster now. But there's nothing you can do. Nothing you can say. This is how it works. This is how it's always worked. You're not choosing love. Love is choosing you. Or rather, your parents are choosing it for you. Based on practical considerations, economic considerations, considerations that have nothing to do with butterflies in your stomach or the way someone's laugh makes you smile. Let me paint the picture more clearly. In the Middle Ages, dating as we understand it today simply did not exist. There were no coffee dates, no long walks to get to know each other, no texting at 2 a.m. asking, what are you doing? No. If you wanted to find love, or more accurately, if you wanted to get married, you didn't go looking. Your family did the looking for you. And what they were looking for wasn't compatibility. It wasn't shared interests or a sense of humor. It was livestock. It was land. It was alliances. It was survival. If you were born into the nobility, your fate was likely sealed before you could even speak. You might be betrothed at age 5, promised to someone you never met, someone who lived in another castle, another county, another country, even The marriage wasn't about you. It was about your father's political ambitions, about securing borders, about preventing wars or starting them. You were a chess piece, a very expensive, very well-dressed chess piece. And when the time came, you'd meet your spouse for the first time on your wedding day. Imagine that, walking into a church, seeing a stranger standing at the altar, and knowing that this person, this complete stranger, is about to become your husband, your wife, the person you'll spend the rest of your life with, the person you'll share a bed with, have children with, grow old with, or not, because life was short. And marriages, even arranged ones, didn't always last long. There's a documented case from 13th century England. A girl named Eleanor. She was 12 years old. Her father had arranged for her to marry Lord William, a man of 40. She'd never seen him, never spoken to him. On the day of the wedding, she was dressed in her finest gown. Her hair was braided and pinned. She wore a circlet of flowers. She looked like a bride, but she felt like a prisoner. When she saw Lord William for the first time, she nearly fainted. He was old, older than her father. His beard was grey. His hands were gnarled. He smiled at her. She did not smile back, but it didn't matter. The priest read the vows. She repeated the words she'd been taught. And just like that, she was married. Her life, her body, her future, all belonged to someone she didn't know. This wasn't unusual. This was normal. But let's say you weren't noble. Let's say you were a peasant, a farmer's daughter, a blacksmith's son. Did you have more freedom? A little, but not much. Your parents still had the final say. And their decision was based on one thing: economics. Your father might know a family down the road. They have a daughter. She's strong, good with animals. Her family owns a decent plot of land, or maybe a particularly productive goat. Your father and her father sit down over ale. They talk. They negotiate. And before you know it, you're courting. Except you're not really courting. You're just spending time with someone your family has pre-approved. Someone who makes sense on paper. Someone whose dowry aligns with your family's needs. Let's talk about dowries for a moment, because this is important. This is the economics of medieval love. If you were a young man hoping to marry, you needed to bring something to the table. And I don't mean charm. I don't mean good looks. I mean tangible assets, land, livestock, tools, a house, or at least a roof that didn't leak too much. If you were the second son, and your father had already promised the family's best oxen to your older brother, well, you might want to seriously consider the priesthood, because without assets, you weren't marriageable. You were just another mouth to feed, a romantic liability. If you were a young woman, your family needed to provide a dowry. This could be money, clothing, linens, furniture, livestock, sometimes a suspiciously generous number of geese. The size of your dowry often determined your prospects. A large dowry meant you could marry well, marry up. If a small dowry meant you'd be lucky to marry at all. And if your family couldn't afford a dowry, well, you might spend a very long time perfecting your embroidery, alone in your father's house, hoping that someday, somehow, a miracle would occur, or that a very desperate man with very low standards would come along. So let's say you're young, let's say you're 16, and let's say you actually like someone. There's a girl in the village. You see her at the well every morning. She has kind eyes. the quick smile. She makes your heart beat a little faster. Or maybe you're a young woman and there's a boy. The blacksmith's apprentice. You notice the way he concentrates when he works, the way his hands move. Strong, careful, capable. You feel something when you see him. Something warm, something hopeful, something that feels like it might be love. But here's the thing. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter how you feel. It doesn't matter if your heart skips a beat every time you see them. Because unless your families are on equal financial footing, unless the economics make sense, you might as well fall in love with a cloud. It's not going to happen. There's a story, not documented, but passed down through oral tradition, about a young man named Thomas. He was a carpenter's apprentice, skilled, hard-working. He fell in love with a girl named Margaret. She was the daughter of a wool merchant, a step above Thomas, socially, but not impossibly so. He worked hard, saved his money, carved beautiful things from wood, small boxes, spoons, a little bird that fit in the palm of your hand. He gave these to Margaret, secretly. She kept them hidden in her room. She loved him too. You could see it in the way she looked at him when they passed each other in the market. But Margaret's father had other plans. He'd arranged for her to marry the son of another merchant, a boy Margaret had never met, a boy from 3 towns over. The dowry had been negotiated, the contract signed. When Margaret found out, she cried for 3 days. Thomas heard the news. He tried to speak to her father, offered everything he had, every coin he'd saved, every piece of furniture he'd made. It wasn't enough. Margaret's father laughed. He said, "I'm not selling my daughter to a carpenter. She's worth more than that." Margaret married the merchant's son. Thomas never married. He lived alone, made beautiful things from wood, and every year, on the anniversary of Margaret's wedding, he carved a small bird and left it at the church, anonymous, a prayer in wood for a love that never had a chance. This wasn't unusual. This was life. You learned not to hope for love. You hoped for security, for a good match, for a spouse who wasn't cruel, who didn't drink too much, who could provide. And if love came later, after the wedding, after the contracts were signed, well, that was a bonus, a gift. But it wasn't expected, and it certainly wasn't required. But let's say you're noble. Let's say you're a knight. You've got armor, a horse, a sword. You've read some poetry. You know how to look brooding. What's your love life like? Welcome to the strange and emotionally exhausting world of courtly love. Now, this isn't dating. This is performance art. This is theatre. This is a highly formalized, deeply impractical system of expressing romantic longing without ever actually doing anything about it. Here's how it works. You, the brave knight, choose a lady, usually a noble woman, usually married. That's important. She has to be married, or at least promised to someone else, because if she were available, this whole thing would be too easy, too real, too dangerous. No, you choose someone unattainable, someone you can never actually have, and then you proceed to adore her from a distance. You don't touch her. God, no, that would ruin everything. You don't even speak to her directly if you can help it. Instead, you suffer, elegantly, poetically. You write verses about her beauty, her grace. the way her hair catches the light, which in medieval terms usually just means she has hair and hasn't publicly insulted your family. You compare her to the sun, to the moon, to the stars, to precious stones, to anything pure and distant and untouchable. You wear her colours at tournaments. A ribbon, a scarf, a token. You joust in her name. You fight. You bleed. You nearly die. All to prove your devotion, your love, your unwavering, completely impractical adoration. And the lady, her role is equally scripted. She's supposed to be flattered, gracious, but also distant, cold. She might acknowledge your existence with a slight nod across the great hall. She might send a brief note. Thank you for your service. Brave knight. She might, if you're very lucky, allow you to kiss her hand. Once, in front of witnesses. But mostly, she's supposed to remain aloof, mysterious, unattainable. Because that's the point. The longing is the point. The suffering is the point. The impossibility is the point. If you actually got the girl, the whole system would collapse. There's a famous example from 12th century France. A knight named Bernard. He fell desperately in love with Eleanor, the Duchess of Aquitaine. She was married, powerful, beautiful, completely out of reach. Bernard wrote her poems, over 50 of them, poems so full of longing, so drenched in beautiful sadness, that they're still studied today. He called her his distant love, his impossible dream, his torment and his hoy. Did Eleanor love him back? We don't know. Probably not. But she kept the poems, she kept the memory, and Bernard. He kept suffering, kept writing, kept loving from afar, until he died, never having touched her, never having held her, never having known if his love was returned. But in the world of courtly love, that didn't matter. The love itself was enough. The performance was enough. The poetry was enough. This system, as strange as it sounds, served a purpose. It gave knights something to do between wars. It gave noble women a form of power in a world that offered them very little. It allowed people to express emotions that would otherwise be dangerous, forbidden. Because let's be clear, if a knight actually had an affair with a married noblewoman, that wasn't courtly love. That was adultery. That was treason. That was grounds for execution. So courtly love became a safety valve, a way to flirt with danger without actually crossing the line, a way to feel something in a world that tried very hard to suppress feeling. It was beautiful. It was tragic. It was completely insane. And it was everywhere. Now, let's bring this back to you. You're 16. You're lying on your straw mattress. The house is quiet now. Your parents have stopped talking. You can hear your father's snores through the floor, your mother's softer breathing. Outside, the wind picks up. You can hear it whistling through the cracks in the walls. The temperature drops. You pull the wool blanket tighter. It smells like sheep, like smoke, like home. You think about the person your father mentioned, the neighbor's son. You've seen him. He's tall, broad-shouldered. He works hard. He doesn't smile much, but he's not unkind. You wonder what it would be like to be his wife, to share his bed, to bear his children. You wonder if you'll grow to love him, or if you'll just grow to tolerate him. You wonder if he wonders the same thing about you. And then you think about the other one, the one you're not supposed to think about, the miller's apprentice, the one with the crooked smile and the kind eyes, the one who makes you laugh, who sees you, really sees you, not as a dowry, not as a transaction, but as a person. You've never spoken to him, not really, just pleasantries. Good morning, cold today. Isn't it? But you've noticed him, and he's noticed you. You can tell by the way he looks at you, quickly, then away, like he's afraid someone will see. And maybe someone will. Maybe someone already has. And maybe that's why your father is arranging this marriage so quickly. To stop something before it starts. To protect you from yourself, from your own foolish heart. You close your eyes. The wind outside grows louder. It sounds like voices, like whispers, like all the people who came before you, all the young people who lay awake at night, wandering, hoping, dreaming of a love they'd never have, a choice they'd never make. You're not special. You're not unique. You're just one more person in a long line of people whose hearts wanted one thing while the world demanded another. And tomorrow, you'll wake up. You'll go about your day. You'll smile at your parents. You'll accept their decision. Because what choice do you have? This is the world you were born into. These are the rules. This is how love works. Or rather, how it doesn't work. How it's never been allowed to work. Not for people like you. Not in times like these. But tonight, just for tonight, in the quiet darkness of your room, you let yourself imagine, what if things were different? What if you could choose? What if love was something you were allowed to want, to seek, to find? The thought is dangerous. Beautiful. Impossible. You hold it close for just a moment, and then you let it go. You let it drift away, like smoke, like mist, like all the other impossible things. And slowly, slowly, you begin to drift too. Your breathing deepens. Your body relaxes. The wind outside becomes a lullaby. The cold becomes comfortable. The dark becomes soft. And you sleep, dreamless, or maybe full of dreams. Dreams of a world that doesn't exist. A world where love is free, where hearts choose, where 16-year-olds get to decide their own fates. But that world is far away. And you're here, in this one, where love is a contract written by someone else. And tomorrow, you'll sign it without reading, without questioning, because that's what good children do. That's what survival demands. Sleep now. The Middle Ages will still be here when you wake. The arrangements will still be made. The future will still be written. But for now, for this moment, you're free. Free to dream. Free to hope. Free to imagine. Even if just for a little while. Even if just until dawn. You're still here. Good. Let your breathing stay slow. Deep. Easy. Tonight we continue where we left off. In the medieval world, where love was a commodity, where marriage was a contract, where your heart, your body, your future, all belonged to someone else. But even in a world this rigid, this controlled, people found ways, small ways, secret ways, dangerous ways, to express what they felt, to reach out, to connect, even when they weren't supposed to. Tonight, we're going to talk about those ways. The tokens, the glances, the stolen moments, the carefully coded messages. Welcome to medieval romance. The underground version, let's start with something simple, something small, something that could fit in your pocket or hide in your sleeve. Token, think of it as medieval texting. Slow, confusing, open to wildly inaccurate interpretation. But sometimes it was all you had. Here's how it worked. Let's say you're a knight. You're young, ideally handsome, though that's not required. You're hopelessly in love with a lady. Let's call her Marjorie, Lady Marjorie of wherever. The details don't matter. What matters is that you can't speak to her alone, can't touch her hand, can't even look at her for too long without someone noticing and asking questions. So what do? You send her something. A glove, maybe your embroidered sleeve, a small piece of fabric with your family crest on it. Nothing says I love you quite like mailing someone part of your wardrobe. You wrap it carefully. You give it to a trusted servant, or a bribed monk, or a page who's too young to understand what's happening but old enough to keep his mouth shut. And you send it to her. Now, if you're Lady Marjorie, you receive this package. You unwrap it, and there it is. A glove, a sweaty, slightly worn, extremely confusing glove. What does this mean? Is he confessing love? Is he asking for a favor? Is he challenging someone to a duel and wants you to know about it? Is he just bad at laundry? You don't know. There's no note, no explanation, just a glove. And now you have a choice. Do you keep it? Do you return it? Do you wear it? Do you burn it? Each choice sends a message. But you're not entirely sure what message you're sending. This is the problem with tokens. They're deeply romantic in theory. In practice, they're a communication disaster waiting to happen. There's a story, probably apocryphal, but charming nonetheless, about a young knight who sent his lady a beautifully embroidered handkerchief. He'd worked on it for weeks, stitched her initials in gold thread, added tiny flowers around the border. It was a masterpiece, a declaration of love in fabric form. He sent it. He waited. Days passed. No response. Finally, he saw her at a feast. She was wearing the handkerchief tucked into her sleeve. His heart soared. She'd accepted it. She understood. She felt the same way. He approached her, bowed, started to speak, and she looked at him with polite confusion. "Oh," she said, "this I found it in my chamber. I thought my maid had left it. It's lovely, isn't it? I've been looking for the owner." "Do you know whose it is?" The knight's heart shattered. He mumbled something, walked away, never told her, died 20 years later. Still heartbroken, still wondering what might have been if he'd just included a note. But let's say the token system works. Let's say the message is understood. The lady keeps the glove. She sends something back. A ribbon, a lock of her hair, a small pendant. These were serious gestures. A ribbon tied to your sword hilt, a lock of hair kept in a locket close to your heart. These things meant something. They were public declarations. In a way, everyone at court could see the ribbon. They knew what it meant. And yet, because nothing was spoken aloud, because everything remained in the realm of the symbolic, it was technically proper, technically acceptable. As long as no one said the words, as long as no one admitted what was actually happening, you could love someone desperately, publicly, tragically, as long as you pretended you weren't. For commoners, tokens were simpler, less embroidered sleeves, more practical gestures, a carving, a small wooden bird, a cup you'd made yourself, a handkerchief you'd stitched while watching the sheep. These items carried just as much weight, maybe more, Because when you're poor, when every object you own has value, has use, giving something away means something. It's not just symbolic, it's sacrifice. It's saying, I value you more than I value this thing. Which in medieval terms, when this thing might be your only cup, your only warm cloth, is a profound statement. But tokens were risky. Give one to the wrong person and suddenly you're engaged to someone you can't stand. Or worse, someone dangerous, someone violent, someone whose family is feuding with yours. There are records of tokens being intercepted, read by the wrong people, used as evidence in accusations of adultery, of treason, of witchcraft, even because if you couldn't explain why you had this glove, this ribbon, this lock of hair, people assumed the worst. And in the Middle Ages, the worst could get you killed. Now let's talk about the most frustrating part of medieval romance. The chaperones. Imagine this. You're a young woman, 15, maybe 16. You're not allowed to go anywhere alone. Anywhere you want to fetch water from the well, your aunt comes with you. You want to walk to the market, your cousin tags along. You want to sit in the garden and read, your mother's maid sits 10 feet away. Knitting, watching, listening, you are never, ever alone. And neither is any man who might want to speak to you. This was intentional. This was the system. The logic was simple. If men and women were never alone together, nothing improper could happen. No touching, no kissing, no whispered confessions of love, no promises that couldn't be kept, no scandals, no pregnancies, no broken hearts, just nice, safe, supervised interactions where everyone behaved, where nothing interesting ever happened. Let's paint a picture. You're a young man. You're interested in someone. Let's say it's the baker's daughter. You've seen her at church. She has a kind face, a gentle smile. You want to talk to her. So you go to her house. You knock on the door. Her father answers. He's holding a knife. He was cutting bread. Probably, hopefully, he looks at you, asks what you want. You stammer, say you wanted to speak with his daughter. He nods, doesn't smile, calls her. She comes to the door. Her mother appears behind her, also holding something, a wooden spoon. The maid is there too, and possibly a younger brother. They all stare at you. You try to speak, to say something charming, something romantic, but your mouth is dry. Your mind is blank. All you can think about is how many people are watching, listening, judging. You say something about the weather. She agrees. It is cold. Yes, very cold. You nod. She nods. Her father shifts his weight. The knife glints. You thank them for their time. You leave. Mission accomplished. You've spoken to her for 30 seconds under the watchful eyes of her entire family. Romance is alive and well. But let's say you're braver or more desperate. You try to arrange a private meeting. This is dangerous. This is the kind of thing that could ruin both of you. But you're young. You're in love. You're willing to risk it. So you send a message through a trusted friend or a servant you've bribed. The message says, meet me by the old oak tree. After Vespers, the message reaches her. She's terrified, excited, torn. She knows she shouldn't. She knows what will happen if she's caught. But she wants to see you, wants to hear your voice without her mother's maid breathing down her neck. So she agrees. After Vespers, when the church bells have stopped ringing, when the sun is setting and the shadows are long, she slips out. She tells her mother she's going to check on the chickens. Her mother nods, doesn't suspect, but her younger sister sees, follows, hides behind a wall, watches. You're waiting by the oak tree. Your heart is pounding. You hear footsteps. Turn. It's her. She's here. She came. You start to speak, to tell her everything you've been holding inside. And then you hear it. A cough. You both freeze. Turn. Her sister steps out from behind the tree, smiling, triumphant. I'm telling, Mother, she says, unless you give me your Sunday coin for a month. You look at each other. You've been caught. Not by parents, not by the church, by a 10-year-old with excellent timing and a keen sense of opportunity. This is your privacy. This is your romantic moment. Interrupted, surveilled, turned into a transaction. Even letter writing wasn't safe. In some monasteries, monks were tasked with screening correspondence, reading letters sent between young people, checking for improper content, moral corruption, anything that suggested physical affection, anything that went beyond polite pleasantries. If your letter was too passionate, too specific, too real, it might never reach its destination. It might be burned, or worse, read aloud as an example of sin, of temptation, of what happens when young people are allowed to express themselves without supervision. So you learn to write in code, in metaphor, in language so obscure, so layered, that even you weren't entirely sure what you were saying. A typical love letter might read something like this. Dearest lady, the moon weeps for the sun, the river longs for the sea, the dove calls for the hawk, and I, unworthy, reach toward the stars, yours in eternal contemplation. What does this mean? Probably I love you, or maybe I'm having an existential crisis, or maybe I've been reading too much poetry and have lost touch with reality. The point is, you couldn't just say, I miss you. I think about you. I want to hold your hand. That was too direct, too dangerous, too likely to be intercepted and used against you. So you hid your meaning. You buried it. You hoped the person receiving the letter would understand, and you prayed no one else would. But despite all the surveillance, all the rules, all the watchful eyes, people still found ways, small ways, stolen glances across the great hall, a brush of fingers when passing a cup, a note hidden in a prayer book, a flower left on a windowsill. These tiny gestures, these fragments of connection, they mattered. They were dangerous. They were thrilling. They were the only romance most people would ever know. And they were enough, or they had to be, because the alternative was nothing. Was silence, was a life lived entirely according to other people's rules. Let's talk about festivals, because festivals were different. Festivals were special. For a few brief hours, the rules relaxed, just a little, just enough. Harvest festivals, May Day celebrations, saints' feast days. These were the rare moments when young men and women could mingle, could dance, could laugh, could touch hands in a circle dance and pretend it was accidental. These were your best chances, your only chances, and you made the most of them. Picture this. It's May Day. The village is decorated with flowers. There's a maypole in the center of the square, ribbons streaming down from the top, music playing, people gathering. You're there. So is she, the one you've been watching, hoping for, dreaming about, You see her across the crowd. She's wearing a crown of flowers. She's laughing with her friends. You want to approach her, but you're nervous. What if she doesn't want to talk to you? What if her father sees? What if you say something stupid, but then the dancing starts? People form a circle. Grab the ribbons. You move closer. Casually, not too obvious. You position yourself near her. The dance begins. You're holding a ribbon. She's holding the one next to yours. You move in the pattern, weaving in and out. Closer, further, closer again. Your hands are inches apart. You can smell flowers in her hair. Leona, maybe, or roses. The music speeds up. The circle tightens for just a moment, just a breath. Your fingers brush, touch, hold. She doesn't pull away. She looks at you, smiles, and then the dance moves on. You're separated. The moment is over. But it happened. You touched her hand, and she let you. And that small, perfect, impossible moment, that's what you'll remember. That's what you'll hold on to. Through everything that comes after. Through the arranged marriage. Through the years. Through the life you didn't choose. You remember the May Day when you held her hand, and she smiled. These festivals weren't just about dancing. There were games, contests, opportunities to show off. If you were a young man, you could enter the sack race, try to win, impress her with your athleticism, or more likely, fall on your face and make her laugh. Either way, she's noticing you. That's what matters. You could try to catch a greased pig, which sounds ridiculous, and it is, but it's also entertaining. And in a world where entertainment is rare, where life is mostly work and prayer and more work, anything that makes people laugh is valuable. So you chase the pig, you slip in the mud. You probably don't catch it, but everyone's watching. Everyone's laughing. And she's laughing too. At you, maybe, but also with you. And that's something, if you were noble, your version of flirting at a festival was different, more refined, more scripted. You might compose a verse on the spot. Something about how her eyes are like twin stars, or how her grace puts the swans to shame. These compliments were expected, formulaic, even, but if you could deliver them with sincerity, with just the right amount of longing in your voice, they could work. You might offer a gift, a small carved figure, a piece of ribbon, a flower, hopefully not something that was clearly made by your servant 5 minutes ago. That's a little too obvious. The key was to seem effortlessly romantic, to make it look like this grand gesture just occurred to you, spontaneously, out of pure inspiration. Even though you've been planning it for weeks. Food also played a role. If you could offer her something to eat, something special, that was significant. A honey cake, a piece of spiced bread, a cup of sweet wine. If she accepted, if she ate from your hand, metaphorically speaking, that was a good sign. That meant she was open to you, interested, willing to continue this careful dance of almost courtship. If she handed it to her dog, well, that meant you should probably try somewhere else. With someone else, someone whose dog isn't quite so well fed. But all of this, every moment of it, happened under watchful eyes. Mothers, fathers, priests, neighbors, the blacksmith's wife who had nothing better to do than stand at her window and watch who was talking to whom. Everyone was watching. Everyone had opinions. And one wrong move, one step too far, one moment of genuine affection expressed too publicly, and suddenly you were the subject of gossip. Your flirty smile became a youthful indiscretion. Your innocent dance became evidence of loose morals. The priest might mention it in his next sermon, without naming names. Of course, but everyone would know who he was talking about, and your parents would hear, and there would be consequences. So you learned to be careful. You learned to express everything with your eyes, with the smallest gestures, a tilt of the head, a half smile. These became your language, your code, and if someone understood that code, if someone could read what you were trying to say without words, well, that was a kind of magic, a kind of intimacy that went deeper than anything you could say out loud, because it was secret, because it was yours, because no one else could see it, or if they did, they couldn't prove it. And in a world where everything was controlled, where every aspect of your life was dictated by someone else, that small, secret space, that invisible connection, was precious, was powerful, was sometimes the only thing that made life bearable. Now, let's bring you back. You're lying in your bed. The festival was days ago, maybe weeks, but you're still thinking about it, about the dance, about her hand in yours, about the way she looked at you. You're smiling in the dark, even though you know it's foolish, even though you know nothing can come of it. Your marriage is already arranged. The contracts are being drawn up. The dowry is being negotiated. By summer, you'll be married to someone else, someone you don't love, someone you barely know. But tonight, just tonight, you let yourself remember the festival, the ribbons, the flowers, the music, the moment here, and her smile, the way time seemed to stop, just for a breath, just for a heartbeat, just long enough for you to feel what love might be like. If the world were different, if you were free, if hearts could choose, you take a deep breath, let it out slowly. The room is dark, cold, but you're warm under your blanket. Your breathing is slowing, deepening. The memories are fading, not disappearing, just softening, becoming part of the background, part of the gentle hum of thought that carries you towards sleep. Tomorrow will come. The arrangements will continue. The future will unfold exactly as it's been planned. But tonight, you have this memory, this moment, this small, perfect, impossible thing, and it's yours. No one can take it from you. No one can arrange it away. No one can bargain it or trade it or put a price on it. It's just yours. And that's enough for now. For tonight, it's enough. Sleep now. Let the festival fade. Let the music quiet. Let the ribbons fall still. Tomorrow, the world will demand things from you. Will ask you to be practical, to be obedient, to be sensible. But tonight, you're allowed to dream, allowed to hope, allowed to remember what it felt like. For just a moment, to hold someone's hand and feel like maybe, just maybe, love was possible. Even here, even now, even in a world that tried so hard to make it impossible. Sleep, dream, remember, and let that be enough. Still drifting, good. Let the stories carry you deeper. We've talked about tokens, about chaperones, about stolen glances at festivals. But now it's time to talk about what happened next. The end goal, the inevitable conclusion. marriage. Not the fairy tale kind, the medieval kind, where love was optional and contracts were everything. Let's start with the peasants, because their version of courtship, while still controlled, was at least somewhat grounded in reality. If you were a peasant, you didn't write poetry. You didn't send embroidered sleeves. You noticed someone because they worked hard, because they didn't complain too much, because they had most of their teeth. That was the checklist. That was the standard. You weren't picky. You couldn't afford to be. You needed someone who could survive. Someone who could help you survive. Someone who understood that life was difficult and short and required two people working together just to make it through winter. So how did you show interest? You gave practical gifts. A basket of eggs, a bundle of firewood, a particularly good turnip. And if you were feeling bold, if you really wanted to make an impression, you might carve something, a spoon, a bowl, a small wooden bird. You'd work on it by candlelight, while your family slept, your hands rough from farm work, your fingers not quite steady. But you'd try. You'd make something with your own hand, and you'd give it to them, hoping they'd understand what it meant, hoping they'd see the hours you spent, the care you took, the quiet declaration that you were serious, that you were trying, that you wanted them. Conversations happened during work. You might walk together to the mill, chat while tending sheep, exchange a few words while hauling water or mucking out stalls. You weren't discussing philosophy. You were talking about practical things. The weather, whether the crops would survive, whether old Jeffrey's cow had finally died. These weren't romantic conversations, but they were real. They were honest, and in their own way, they were intimate, because you were sharing the rhythms of daily life, the small observations, the quiet concerns. You were learning each other, not through grand gestures, but through the steady accumulation of ordinary moments. And sometimes, in those moments, something shifted. You'd be walking back from the well, both carrying heavy buckets. You'd glance over, see the way the evening light caught their face, the way they smiled at something you said, and you'd think, I could do this. I could spend my life walking beside this person, carrying buckets, talking about nothing, and somehow that would be enough. That would be everything. The proposal, when it came, was usually quick, simpler, if both of you agreed, and more importantly, if both families agreed. Then marriage followed. Maybe you moved into a shared hut. Maybe you built a new one with help from the village. You brought your best blanket. They brought a goat. Together, you began not with passion, not with poetry, but with partnership, with the shared understanding that survival required two people. And if affection grew over time, if you learned to love each other through the years of working side by side, well, that was a gift, an unexpected blessing in a hard world. Now let's talk about the other kind of marriage, the noble kind, where nothing was simple, where nothing was quick, where everything was a negotiation. If you were noble, your marriage wasn't just about you. It was about land, about titles, about political alliances that could prevent wars or start them. You were a chess piece, a valuable one, but a chess piece nonetheless. Your wedding wasn't a celebration of love. It was a business transaction, a treaty signing, a merger of estates, and everyone involved treated it accordingly. The negotiations could take months. Your father and their father, or your father and their uncle, or various lawyers and advisors who spoke in Latin and used words you didn't understand. They discussed dowries, land grants, inheritance rights. What happened if you died in childbirth? What happened if your husband died in battle? What happened if there were no heirs? Every possible scenario was considered, every potential problem addressed, everything was written down, witnessed, sealed. By the time the actual wedding happened, you'd probably signed more documents than you'd spoken words to your future spouse. There's a recorded case from 14th century France. A young woman named Isabel. She was 16. Her family was minor nobility, respectable but not wealthy. They arranged for her to marry a man named Robert. He was 40, a widower. His first wife had died giving birth to their fifth child. Isabel met him exactly twice before the wedding, both times in the presence of no fewer than 8 people. Both times they spoke perhaps 10 words to each other. On her wedding day, Isabel wore white. She looked beautiful. She walked down the aisle of the church. Robert waited at the altar. His face was kind, or at least not unkind. The priest read the vows. She repeated the words she'd been taught. I do, I will, I promise. And with those words, everything changed. Her body was no longer hers. Her property was no longer hers. Her future was no longer hers. It all belonged to Robert. Legally, officially, permanently. The wedding feast lasted 3 days. There was music, dancing, enough food to feed the village for a month. Everyone celebrated. Everyone drank. Everyone pretended this was a love match, a blessed union. But Isabel knew better. She'd seen the contracts. She knew what this was. A transaction. Her father had needed Robert's money. Robert had needed a young wife to bear more children. And she was the price, the payment, the thing exchanged to make both men happy. Did Robert treat her well? Yes. He was never cruel, never violent. He provided for her, protected her. She bore him 3 more children. And over the years, she learned to care for him. Not love. Perhaps, but something close. Something like affection built from habit and shared experience. It wasn't a life she dreamed of, but it was the life she had. And then there were the rebels, the ones who said no, the ones who looked at the system and decided they'd rather burn it down than live inside it. The ones who eloped. This was dangerous, spectacularly dangerous. If you were noble and you ran away to marry someone of your own choosing, you weren't just defying your parents. You were defying politics. You were sabotaging alliances. You were declaring war on the entire social structure. Let's say you're Lady Eleanor. You've been promised to Lord Boring of Estates Secure. He's fine. Probably you've never met him, but you've fallen desperately in love with someone else. The squire, not even a knight, someone with no land, no title, no prospects, someone who smells faintly of horses and has absolutely nothing to offer except himself. You meet in secret, in the stables, in the garden after dark. You whisper promises, you make plans, and one night you run. You both ride through the darkness, your heart pounding, his hand tight around yours. You make it to a monastery. The abbot owes your family a favor, or maybe you bribed him. Either way, he agrees to marry you. It's done quickly, quietly, just you, the squire, the nervous abbot, and possibly a chicken who wandered in and refused to leave. You speak the vows. You're married, and for about 5 minutes, you're deliriously happy. Then reality arrives. Your family finds out your father is apoplectic. He's threatening to lay siege to the squire's family, except the squire's family is just his elderly mother and a goat. So that's not going to be very impressive. Your mother is weeping into her embroidery. The church is concerned. The gossip is delicious. Everyone is talking. And you're suddenly realizing that romantic rebellion has consequences. Best case scenario. Your family eventually accepts it. They sigh. They grumble. They quietly disown you. But they let you live. You and your squire move to some distant village. You live in poverty. You work hard. You eat thin soup. But you're together. And sometimes, on quiet nights, you look at each other and think it was worth it. Worst case scenario, your marriage is annulled. You're sent to a convent. The squire is killed, or at least thoroughly beaten and exiled, and your father arranges an even worse marriage for you. Someone older, someone meaner, someone who makes sure you never get ideas about love again. These stories happened, not often, but often enough that people knew about them, whispered about them, turned them into songs. Two nobles who chose love over duty, who burned their bridges, who said we'd rather have nothing together than everything apart. It was romantic. It was tragic. It was completely impractical. And it was remembered. Now let's talk about a different kind of forbidden love. The kind that happened behind monastery walls. You'd think monks and nuns would be safe from romance. They'd taken vows, poverty, chastity, obedience. They'd sworn off the world, sworn off desire, sworn off everything that made life complicated and messy and human. But humans are humans. Even in robes, even in prayer, even in silence. Feelings happened. Sometimes between monks and nuns who served in the same religious house. Sometimes between two monks, two nuns. The heart, it turned out, didn't care much about vows. It wanted what it wanted. And sometimes what it wanted was completely forbidden. Brother Anselm and Sister Beatrice, let's call them that. Not their real names, but names that could have been real. Brother Anselm worked in the scriptorium, copying manuscripts. His handwriting was beautiful, but he's easy. Sister Beatrice tended the herb garden. She knew plants, healing, medicine. They weren't supposed to interact. The monastery had rules, strict separation. But sometimes Brother Anselm needed herbs for ink, and Sister Beatrice would bring them. They'd exchange a few words about plants, about weather, about nothing important. But the words became longer, the visits more frequent. They started writing letters, disguised as theological discussions. My soul seeks the light of understanding. He wrote, and she replied, the garden teaches patience to those who wait. They thought they were being clever. They weren't. Someone noticed. Someone always noticed. They were separated. Brother Anselm was sent to a different monastery, 3 days' journey away. Sister Beatrice was confined to her cell, made to do penance. The letters were burned. The meetings ended. They never saw each other again. Did they regret it? Probably. Did they wish they'd been more careful? Certainly. But did they wish it had never happened? That we don't know. There were scandals. Of course, pregnant nuns. Monks found in compromising positions. These stories spread like wildfire, became cautionary tales, became proof of moral weakness. became evidence that even those who dedicated their lives to God could fall. The punishments were harsh. Exile, public humiliation, sometimes worse. But the fact that it kept happening, that despite the risks, despite the consequences, people kept falling in love in these places, says something about the power of connection, about the impossibility of suppressing human feeling, about the fact that stone walls and holy vows could contain bodies but not hearts. Now let's talk about what happened after marriage, because the story doesn't end at the altar. Sometimes marriages were happy. Sometimes couples genuinely grew to love each other, shared labor, shared beds, shared children, shared lives. The affection that grew from those shared years was real, deep, lasting, but not all marriages were happy. Some were miserable, trapped, suffocating, and in the Middle Ages, there was no way out. Divorce didn't exist, not for regular people. The church said marriage was permanent, a sacrament, unbreakable. You could try for an annulment, but you needed a very good reason. You'd have to prove the marriage was never valid, that one of you was already married, or too closely related, or that the marriage was never consummated, which meant someone had to confirm that fact. In writing, possibly under oath. It was humiliating, expensive, almost impossible. So most people didn't try. They just endured. You're lying in your bed again. The room is dark, cold. You can hear your spouse breathing beside you. Someone you've known for years now. Someone you've built a life with. Sometimes you look at them and feel affection, gratitude. Sometimes you look at them and feel nothing. Sometimes you wonder what your life would have been like if things had been different, if you'd been allowed to choose, if love had been part of the equation. But then you push those thoughts away because they're dangerous, because they lead nowhere, because this is your life. This person is better. This future, and wondering about alternatives only makes it harder. So you close your eyes. You steady your breathing. You let the thoughts drift away, like smoke, like fog, like everything else you can't control. And slowly, you fall asleep. Not happy, not sad, just tired, just ready to rest, just grateful that for a few hours, you don't have to think, don't have to wonder, don't have to be anything except asleep. Let's leave the medieval world behind for now. Let the stone castles fade. Let the arranged marriages dissolve. Tonight we're riding east, far east, across deserts that stretch to the horizon, across steppes where the grass waves like an ocean, to a time before empires had names, before borders were drawn, to a time when queens ruled from horseback, and one queen in particular made an empire bleed. Her name was Domiris, Queen of the Massagetæ. You probably never heard of her. Most people haven't. History doesn't always remember women, especially women who lived on the margins, women who left no cities, no monuments, no marble temples with their names carved in stone. But Damaris left something else. She left a story, a warning, a legend. She left the severed head of the most powerful man in the ancient world, floating in a wineskin full of blood. But let's start at the beginning. Who was Tomiris? She wasn't a palace queen, wasn't raised in luxury, didn't wear silk or sit on a golden throne. Her court was the open sky. Her palace was a felt tent that could be packed and moved in an hour. Her throne was the back of a horse. She was a nomad, a warrior, a leader of people who lived on the wind. The Massagetæ were a confederation of tribes, scattered across the steppes of Central Asia, east of the Caspian Sea, in lands that were too wild for Persian governors, too distant for Babylonian scribes, too free for anyone to truly control. These were people who moved with the seasons, who followed their herds, who lived by codes older than any written law. They were horse people. Every child learned to ride before they could walk steadily, learned to shoot a bow from the saddle, learned to survive in a landscape that offered no mercy, no shelter, just endless grass and endless sky. The Masajatai weren't farmers, weren't city builders. They were hunters, raiders, warriors, and they were fierce, brutally fierce, the kind of fierce that made empires nervous. Their culture was different from anything the settled world understood. Women could fight, not as exceptions, not as curiosities, but as warriors, as equals. When archaeologists dig up Massageti burial sites today, they find women buried with weapons, with armor, with horses. These weren't ceremonial graves. These women had fought, had bled, had died in battle, and they were honored for it. Tomiris wasn't unusual in this world. She was the ideal, the embodiment of everything her people valued. She was strong, strategic, unflinching. She led not because of her bloodline alone, but because she'd proven herself, proven she could make the hard decisions, could protect her people, could ride into battle and come out alive. She worshipped the sun, the eternal light, the master of the Massageti. To swear by the sun was to swear by everything sacred, everything true, everything that mattered. And if you broke that oath, if you betrayed the sun, you didn't just anger men, you angered the cosmos. The Massageti believed in justice, in balance, in the idea that actions had consequences, that blood demanded blood, that betrayal demanded vengeance. These weren't just beliefs, they were laws, written in the movement of stars, in the rising and setting of the sun, in the very fabric of existence. Now, enter Cyrus, Cyrus the Great, king of Persia, conqueror of nations, builder of the largest empire the world had ever seen. He'd taken Lydia, taken Babylon, taken everything he'd reached for. He was brilliant, ruthless, unstoppable, and he was looking east. The Massageti were next on his list, but Cyrus was clever. He knew direct conquest would be difficult. These weren't city people he could besiege. These were nomads, vast, mobile, hard to pin down. So he tried a different approach, a political one. He sent a proposal to Tomiris. Marry me. He said, unite our peoples, your lands and mine, your strength and my empire. Together we'll be unstoppable. It sounded generous. It sounded wise. It sounded like respect. Tomiris saw right through it. She wasn't young, wasn't naive. She'd ruled long enough to recognize the trap. This wasn't about marriage, wasn't about alliance. This was about control. If she married Cyrus, her kingdom would become a province. Her people would become subjects. She would become a trophy, a decorative queen, a symbolic figurehead with no real power. Her lance, her herds, her warriors, all absorbed into the Persian machine. Her answer was firm. No. She sent messengers back to Cyrus, told him plainly, I see what you're doing. I know what you want. and you will not have it. If you want my kingdom, you'll have to take it. And taking it won't be easy. Cyrus didn't take rejection well. Kings rarely do. If charm wouldn't work, force would. He gathered his armies, massive armies, seasoned soldiers who'd conquered half the known world. He crossed the Araxes River, the natural boundary between his empire and Massagete lands. He established camps, built bridges, set up supply lines. This was an invasion. Official, undeniable. The war had begun. Tomiris wasn't surprised. She'd been preparing, gathering her warriors, consulting with her chiefs, planning. She knew Cyrus's reputation, knew his tactics, knew he was dangerous, but she also knew her land, knew her people, knew that fighting on the open steppe against mounted warriors who'd lived in the saddle their entire lives was very different from besieging cities. But Cyrus had one advantage: deception. He didn't just bring soldiers, he brought strategy. And his strategy was cruel. He left a portion of his army behind, in a camp, filled with wine, with food, with luxuries the Massagetae rarely saw. It was a trap, and walking into that trap was Tomiris' son, Spargapises. He was young, brave, eager to prove himself. He led a detachment of warriors. They found the Persian camp, found it seemingly abandoned, found the wine. The Massagetae didn't drink like Persians did. Wine was rare, intoxicating, powerful. The warriors drank, celebrated, let their guard down. And that's when the Persians returned. The Massagetae were overwhelmed, drunk, confused, unable to fight effectively. Many were killed, many more were captured, including Spargapises, including Tomiris' son. When Tomiris heard the news, her world shattered. This wasn't just a military loss. This was personal. Her son, her heir, her child, captured, held prisoner by a man who tried to conquer her through marriage and now was conquering her through treachery. She sent a message to Cyrus. Simple, direct, give me back my son. Leave my lands, and I'll let you go. But if you refuse, if you keep him, I swear by the sun, the master of the Massagetae, I will give you your fill of blood. It was a promise, a prophecy, a warning that Cyrus should have heeded. He didn't. He ignored her, kept Spargapises prisoner, believed he had the upper hand, believed Tomiris would negotiate, would surrender, would do anything to get her son back. He was wrong. Spargapises, ashamed of his capture, ashamed of his failure, took his own life in his cell, in Persian custody. Rather than live as a prisoner, rather than be used as leverage against his mother, he chose death. When Tomiris learned of this, something inside her changed. The grief was enormous, crushing, the kind that makes you want to stop breathing, stop existing. But Tomiris didn't stop. She didn't weep, didn't collapse, didn't retreat to her tent to mourn. She stood, she looked at her chiefs, at her warriors, and she spoke. One sentence: we ride at dawn. The war was no longer about territory, about politics, about empire. It was about vengeance, about making Cyrus pay, about showing him that there were some people you didn't betray, some mothers you didn't cross, some queens who would burn the world down before they let you walk away. You're drifting now, sinking deeper, The story wraps around you like wind across the steppe. You can almost see her, Tomuris, standing in the firelight, her face hard, her eyes dry, her hand on her sword. Around her, warriors prepare, sharpen weapons, check armor, feed horses. No one speaks. No one needs to. They all know what's coming. They all know this isn't just war. This is retribution. You close your eyes. You feel the cold night air of the steppe. Smell the smoke. Hear the horses shifting. Somewhere in the distance, a wolf howls, or maybe it's the wind, or maybe it's the sound of grief turned into fury. Tomorrow, Tomuris readers. Tomorrow, Cyrus learns what it means to take a son from a queen who has nothing left to lose. But tonight, rest, let the story pause. Let the moment hold. Let sleep take you gently, like the grass bending in the wind, like the stars wheeling overhead, like everything on the steppe, endless, patient, waiting. Sleep now. The battle comes tomorrow. But tonight, you're safe. Tonight, you're just a listener, just a dreamer, just someone carried along by an old story about a queen, a king, and the price of underestimating a mother's rage. You're deep in sleep now, but the story calls you back, pulls you gently, like a hand on your shoulder, like a voice in the dark. Tomuris has lost her son. The grief sits in her chest like a stone, heavy, cold, permanent, but she doesn't let it paralyze her. She lets it sharpen her, turn her into something harder, something more dangerous, something that Cyrus the Great is about to meet on the battlefield. And regret, deeply, dawn breaks over the steppe. The sky is pale, washed out, the kind of morning that feels like the world is holding its breath. Tomuris stands outside her tent. She hasn't slept, hasn't eaten. She's been planning, thinking, going over every detail, every possibility. She knows Cyrus's tactics now, knows he fights with deception, with tricks, with strategies designed to make you underestimate him. She won't make that mistake again. This time, she's setting the trap. This time, Cyrus walks into her plan, not the other way around. She calls her tribal council. The chiefs gather, weathered men and women, faces carved by wind and sun. They fought before, lost people before, but this feels different. This feels final. Tomuris speaks. Her voice is calm, steady. She tells them the plan, where they'll position their forces, how they'll draw the Persians in, when they'll strike. The chiefs listen, nod, ask questions, make suggestions. This isn't a monarchy where one person commands and everyone obeys. This is a council, a collective. They fight together. They decide together. They win or die together. By midday, the Massagetæ are moving, not a traditional army, not neat rows of infantry, not organized columns. They move like water, like wind. Hundreds of warriors on horseback, spread across the plain. Each rider knows their role, knows the signals, knows how to move as one without needing orders shouted across the field. They wear leather armor, light, flexible, decorated with symbols, with paint, with the marks of their clans. Their horses are small, sturdy, built for endurance, for speed, for the kind of running that goes on for hours. for days. These aren't parade animals. These are war horses, and they know it. Tilmairice rides at the front. She's not young anymore. The years have lined her face, greyed her hair, but she sits straight in the saddle, her bow across her back, her sword at her side. She wears her son's colours, a strip of cloth tied round her arm. Rate, the colour of blood, the colour of rage, the colour of what's coming. The warriors see it. They understand. This isn't just war. This is personal. And they ride harder because of it. Faster, with more focus, more fury. They ride for their queen, for her son, for every person who's ever been underestimated by an empire that thought it could take whatever it wanted. Cyrus, meanwhile, is confident he's won every battle he's ever fought. He has the numbers, the experience, the reputation. He's heard that Tomyris is coming. He's not worried. He's fought grief-stricken enemies before. They're emotional, reckless, easy to defeat. He positions his forces carefully, prepares for what he assumes will be a straightforward engagement. He expects Tomyris to charge, to attack wildly, to throw her warriors at him in a desperate, doomed assault. He's ready for that. He's not ready for what actually happens. The two armies meet on an open plain, flat, featureless, no trees, no hills, just grass and sky and the sound of thousands of hooves. The Persians are organized, disciplined. They form lines, raise shields, wait for the order to advance. The Massagetæ don't form lines. They circle, they spread, they move like a living thing, shifting, flowing, never still. The Persians try to engage, try to close the distance, but the Massagetæ don't let them. They stay just out of reach, firing arrows, retreating, firing again. It's maddening, exhausting. The Persians chase, the Massagetæ lead them further, further away from their supply lines, away from their camp, into the open, into Tomyris's trap. And then the signal comes, a horn, low, long, echoing across the plain. The Massagetæ stop retreating. They turn, they charge, all at once, from every direction. The Persians suddenly find themselves surrounded, outnumbered in every direction that matters. Panic sets in. Orders are shouted, but they're drowned out by the sound. The thunder of hooves, the screaming of horses, the whistling of arrows, the clash of metal on metal. This isn't a battle. This is chaos. Beautiful. Terrible. Unstoppable chaos. Tomyris fights in the thick of it. She doesn't command from a distance, doesn't watch from a hill. She's there, in the dust, in the blood, in the center of the storm. She fires her bow until the arrows run out. Then she draws her sword, cuts through anyone in her path. Her face is streaked with dirt, with sweat, maybe with tears. It's impossible to tell. Her hair has come loose, flies wild around her face. She looks like something ancient, something primal, something that empires should fear. And the Persians do fear her. Those who see her, those who recognize the red cloth on her arm, they try to avoid her, try to retreat. But there's nowhere to go. The Massagetæ are everywhere, relentless, unyielding, driven by something more than duty, more than orders. They're driven by loyalty, by love, by the shared grief of a people who've lost too much and refuse to lose anything more. The battle lasts hours. The sun crosses the sky. Shadows lengthen. Bodies fall. Horses scream. The dust rises so thick you can barely see, can barely breathe. And then, slowly, inevitably, the Persians begin to break, to run, to scatter. They've lost. They know it. Some try to surrender. The Massachete don't accept. This isn't that kind of battle. This isn't about prisoners, about ransoms, about treaties. This is about blood, about vengeance, about making sure that what happened to Spargapesis never happens to anyone else's son. When the dust finally settles, when the screaming stops, when the last of the fighting dies down, Tomiris stands in the center of the field. She's breathing hard. Her sword is red. Her hands are shaking, not from fear, from exhaustion, from adrenaline, from grief that still hasn't found release. Around her, the Massagetes search the bodies, looking for someone specific, looking for the man who started this, the man who proposed marriage, who set the trap, who took her son. They find him, Cyrus the Great, dead, face down in the grass, killed in the fighting. No one knows exactly who struck the blow. Maybe it was Tomiris herself. Maybe it was one of her warriors. Maybe it was just the chaos. The inevitable result of underestimating the people he tried to conquer. It doesn't matter. He's dead. The great king, the unstoppable conqueror, dead on a step he thought he could claim. Tomiris orders his body brought to her. The warriors comply, drag it through the dirt, lay it at her feet. She looks down at him. This man, this king, this fool who thought he could take whatever he wanted. She feels nothing. No satisfaction, no joy, just emptiness. Just the cold knowledge that killing him didn't bring her son back, didn't undo anything, didn't make the grief smaller. But it did send a message, and she's going to make sure that message is clear. She orders his head severed. It's done quickly, brutally, without ceremony. Then she calls for a wineskin, has it filled with blood, human blood, Persian blood, blood from the soldiers who followed Cyrus, who believed in him, who died for him. The head is placed inside, submerged, and Tomiris speaks to the head, to Cyrus, to his memory, to everyone watching, to history itself. You thirsted for blood. She says, her voice is quiet, steady. Now drink your fill. It's not a shout, not a scream, just a statement, a fact, a promise kept. She'd warned him, told him what would happen. He didn't listen. Now he's learning. Too late, but learning nonetheless. The story spread across the ancient world, from the steppes to Babylon, from Persia to Greece, whispered in markets, told around fires, written down by historians who heard it second hand, third hand. The details changed, morphed, grew more dramatic with each telling, but the core remained. A queen, a mother, a warrior, had defeated the greatest king of the age, had made him pay, had shown the world that some people couldn't be conquered, some others couldn't be threatened, some grief turned into something powerful enough to bring down empires. Tomiris didn't celebrate, didn't build monuments, didn't declare herself empress. She returned to her people, to the tents, to the herds, to the endless movement of nomadic life. She'd won, but the victory was hollow. Her son was still dead. The Persians were defeated. But that didn't change anything, didn't heal anything. She'd avenged him, done what needed to be done, kept her oath to the sun. But grief doesn't disappear because you've taken revenge. It just sits there, heavy, patient, waiting for the quiet moments. After this, she fades from history. No more records, no more mentions, just silence. She probably lived out her years, led her people, died eventually, was buried somewhere on the steppe. No marker, no tomb, just earth and grass and wind. The way her people had always been buried, the way she would have wanted. But her story survived, carried by the wind, told by travelers, written by historians, painted by artists centuries later. Renaissance painters loved her. They painted her holding Cyrus's head, calm, regal, victorious. They painted her as a symbol of justice, of female power, of what happens when you underestimate a mother's love. Modern nations claimed her, built statues, named streets, taught children her name. She became a legend, not because she built an empire, but because she destroyed one, not because she conquered lands, but because she refused to be conquered, not because she sought glory, but because she sought justice, and found it at the end of a sword, in a wineskin full of blood. You're barely here now. The story has carried you far, to the steps, to the battle, to the moment when everything changed. You can almost see it, the grass, the sky, the queen standing over the body of a king. You can almost hear the wind, the horses, the final words. You thirsted for blood. Now drink your fill, and then it all fades, softens, becomes just a story again, just words, just history, just something that happened a very long time ago, to people who are dust now. Bones buried under earth that's been turned and planted and built on 1,000 times. But the story remains, and tonight, it's yours, a gift, a reminder. That power doesn't always win. That grief can become strength. That mothers should never be underestimated. Sleep now. Let Tomuris rest. Let Cyrus stay dead. Let the battle fade. Let the steppe grow quiet. Tomorrow, other stories wait. But tonight, this one is enough. More than enough. Sleep, dream, and let the wind carry you home. We stay in the steppes tonight, but we go further back, before Tomiris, before empires had names, before anyone thought to write anything down, to the people who lived on the wind, who made their homes from felt and leather, who carried everything they owned on the backs of horses, who answered to no king, no emperor, no city, just the sky, just the grass, just the endless horizon. These were the nomads. And tonight, we ride with them. Imagine a life with no walls, no streets, no buildings that stay in one place. Your home is a circle of felt, stretched over wooden poles. It can be assembled in an hour, dismantled just as fast, packed onto a cart, moved to wherever the grass is greenest, wherever the water flows, wherever the herds need to go. You don't own land. You can't. Land doesn't move, and you do, always, forever, following the seasons, following the animals, following the rhythm of a life that's older than memory. This is nomadic life, and for thousands of years, millions of people lived it, thrived in it, built entire civilizations without ever building a single permanent structure. Your wealth isn't measured in gold, it's measured in animals. Horses, cattle, sheep, goats. The more you have, the richer you are. Horses especially. Horses are everything. Transportation, weapons, status, symbols, companions. A person's skill is measured by how well they ride, how fast, how long, how gracefully. Children learn to ride before they can walk properly. Strapped to saddles, held by parents, until balance becomes instinct, until the horse's movement feels like your own, until you can shoot an arrow at full gallop, can lean down and grab something from the ground without slowing, can ride for days without rest. This isn't a hobby. This is survival. Nomadic societies weren't disorganized. They weren't chaotic. They had structure, complex structure, clans, tribes, confederations. Leadership passed not always through blood, but through merit, through respect, through the ability to make good decisions, to protect people, to lead them to water, to grass, to victory. A chief might rise because he's brilliant in battle, or because she's wise in counsel, or because they can negotiate peace when war would destroy everything. Power was earned, proven, maintained through action, not just inherited. And they weren't isolated, weren't cut off from the world. They were the world's connective tissue, moving goods across continents, silk from China, spices from India, silver from Persia, furs from the north, slaves from everywhere. They knew every pass through the mountains, every oasis in the desert, every ford across the rivers. They were the original transcontinental merchants. Long before anyone thought to build a road, when trade worked, everyone prospered. When trade broke down, they raided. Simple as that. Let's talk about the Scythians. They ruled the steppes for almost 1,000 years. From the 9th century before Christ to the 2nd. From the Black Sea to the edges of Mongolia. They were horse warriors. The best the ancient world had ever seen. Boys learned to shoot before they learned to read, which was fine because most of them never learned to read. Didn't need to. Their history was oral, sung, gan, remembered, passed down through generations in poems and songs and stories told around fires. They rode small, tough horses, built for endurance, for speed, for living on grass and not much else. They used composite bows made from wood and bone and sinew, shorter than traditional bows, perfect for shooting from horseback, deadly accurate. They could fire while riding at full speed, could turn in the saddle, shoot backwards, hit targets the size of a man's head from 100 paces. Their enemies feared them, called them barbarians. Savage, but the Scythians didn't care what settled people thought. They had freedom. They had the steppe. They had each other. That was enough. Here's something interesting, something that challenges everything ancient Greeks thought they knew. Scythian women fought. This isn't legend. This isn't myth. This is archaeology. Burial mounds across the steppes. Kurgans, they're called massive earthen mounds covering graves. When archaeologists open them, they find gold, weapons, horses sacrificed and buried alongside their riders. And some of those riders are women, not just buried with decorative weapons, but with real weapons, battle-worn, used, and the bones. The skeletons, they show injuries, healed fractures, arrow wounds, sword cuts. These women fought, bled, survived battles, died in battles, and were honored for it. The Greeks heard stories about these warrior women, called them Amazons, thought they were mythical, a distant tribe of women who'd rejected men, who fought and hunted and ruled themselves. The Greeks got it partly right. The women warriors were real, but they weren't separate from men. They fought alongside them, in mixed groups, in families, in clans, because on the steppe, survival required everyone. Gender didn't matter as much as skill, as courage, as the ability to draw a bow and hit what you aimed at. Scythian art is beautiful, strange, full of animals, predators and prey locked in eternal struggle. Wolves, eagles, deer, stags, all flying together in gold and bronze. Intricate, detailed, so detailed you can see individual feathers, individual strands of fur. This art wasn't just decoration, it was identity. It was religion. It was the Scythian worldview rendered in metal. Life is motion, is struggle, is the constant dance between hunter and hunted, between power and vulnerability, between survival and death. They worshipped gods tied to nature, to the sky, to fire, to the earth. They made offerings, sacrificed horses, drank kumis, fermented mare's milk, used cannabis in their rituals. Herodotus, the Greek historian, wrote about this, described how they'd build small tents, fill them with smoke from burning cannabis seeds, sit inside, breathe deeply. He said they'd howl with pleasure. Whether that's accurate or just Herodotus being dramatic, we'll never know. But the archaeological evidence supports it. Bronze censers found in graves, burned plant residue inside. The Scythians knew how to alter consciousness, how to reach for something beyond the everyday, beyond the material. They weren't just warriors, they were mystics, puts, seekers. Eventually, they faded, pressured by other groups, the Sarmatians, the Huns, the endless waves of people moving across the steppes, pushed by climate, bivar, by the slow, grinding pressure of history. The Scythians were absorbed, disappeared, left behind only their graves, their gold, their stories filtered through Greek and Persian texts. But while they lived, they were unstoppable. The storm across the grasslands, a people who answered to no one, who lived free, who died free, and who left behind a legacy that whispers still, in the wind, across the steppes, in the graves beneath the earth, in the gold that glints when the sun hits it just right. Now let's shift from the cold steppes to the burning deserts, from horseback to camelback, from the Scythians to the Bedouins. Different landscape, different animals, but the same spirit, the same refusal to be contained, to be controlled, to live by anyone's rules but their own. The Bedouins made the Arabian desert their home, not despite its harshness, but because of it, because in that vast emptiness, they were free, because no empire could hold desert, could tax it, could control it. The sand belonged to no one, or it belonged to everyone, depending on how you looked at it. Their homes were tents, black goat hair tents, woven tight to keep out sun, to let in breeze. Portable, practical, beautiful in their simplicity. Everything about Bedouin life was designed for movement, for survival in a place that offered almost nothing. Water was sacred, scarce, precious. They knew every well, every oasis, every hidden spring. They could read the land, could tell from the plants, from the sand, from the behavior of animals, where water might be, where safety was, where danger waited. This knowledge kept them alive, and they guarded it carefully, passed it down, father to son, mother to daughter, generation after generation. Camels were their horses, ships of the desert, able to go days without water, to carry enormous loads, to survive on plants that would kill other animals, to walk on sand without sinking. The Bedouins loved their camels, named them, sang about them, wrote poetry comparing beautiful women to beautiful camels, which sounds strange to us, but made perfect sense to them. A good camel meant wealth, mobility, survival. What's more beautiful than that? Their society was built on honor, sharaf, and hospitality, karam. These weren't just values, they were laws, absolute, unbreakable. If someone insulted your family, your tribe, your name, you didn't let it pass. You couldn't. Honor demanded response. Sometimes that meant words, harsh words, public shaming. Sometimes it meant violence, blood feuds that lasted generations, families destroying each other over insults spoken decades ago. It sounds extreme. It was extreme. But in a world without police, without courts, without any authority beyond the tribe, honor was the only law that mattered. But hospitality balanced it. If a stranger came to your tent, you welcomed them, fed them, protected them for 3 days, no questions asked. Didn't matter if they were friend or enemy. Didn't matter if you had barely enough food for your own family. The stranger ate first, ate well, was treated as sacred, because tomorrow you might be the stranger, might need shelter, need water, need kindness from someone who owed you nothing. The desert taught empathy, taught that survival required cooperation, required seeing yourself in others, required giving even when you had almost nothing to give. Bedouin warfare was different from Scythian warfare, less about pitched battles, more about raids. Ghazu, they called it, quick strikes, usually at dawn, steal livestock, capture goods, avoid unnecessary bloodshed. This wasn't about conquest, wasn't about territory, was about redistribution, about evening out wealth, about testing courage, about gaining prestige. A successful raid elevated a man's status, made him marriageable, gave him standing. A failed raid brought shame. But even in raiding, there were rules. Don't kill unnecessarily. Don't harm women or children. Don't destroy what you don't need. Even violence had honor. Poetry was everything. Poets were as respected as warriors, maybe more, because words lasted. Words could shame enemies, could inspire allies, could preserve history, could make the dead immortal. The great poets were remembered, their verses memorized, recited, passed down. Some became law, some became legend, some became the foundation of entire tribal identities. The pre-Islamic Bedouins had no writing, but they had poetry, and poetry was enough. You're drifting now. Deeper, the desert night is cold. The stars are impossibly bright, endless. You're sitting by a fire, the flames dance. Someone is singing an old song about a raid, about a hero, about love lost in the sand. You don't understand all the words, but you feel them in your chest, in your throat. The melody is ancient, haunting, beautiful. You close your eyes. Let the song wash over you. Let the cold night air cool your skin. Let the smoke drift up toward the stars. And slowly, so slowly, you fade, not into nothing, but into everything. Into the sand, the sky, the endless desert. Into the story, into the song, into sleep. Deep, peaceful, carried by voices that have been singing for thousands of years, and will sing for thousands more. Sleep now. Let the Bedouins keep watch. Let the camels rest. Let the desert hold you until morning, until the sun rises, until the sand glows gold again. But that's tomorrow. Tonight, you sleep. We ride further now, to colder steppes, to the people who changed the world without ever building a single cathedral of stone. Not because they could not, but because their homes were meant to move. And when the wind shifted, their whole life shifted with it, as naturally as a horse turning its head toward new grass. Picture the Mongolian steppe in the 13th century. An ocean of land, rolling and empty, where the horizon feels like a circle drawn by the sky itself. In winter, the air bites. In summer, the sun can burn. In spring, the mud clings to boots and hooves. The grass is never guaranteed. The water is never guaranteed, and that uncertainty shapes every habit, every rule, every dream. Here, a family lives in a jar, a round felt tent stretched over a wooden frame. It is practical in a way that feels almost elegant, a home that can be raised in less than an hour, then folded down again before the day is old. Inside, the smell is wool, smoke, milk, leather, and the faint, clean scent of wind that never fully leaves. A small hearth glows in the center. The smoke finds its way out through the opening at the top, carrying prayers and everyday talk up into the wide blue. Outside are the herds, horses first, always, then yaks in colder places, goats and sheep that move like a soft, living carpet, and cattle where the land allows it. Wealth is counted in hooves and breath, not coins. The animals are not background. They are the calendar, the pantry, the blanket, the transport, the livelihood, the heartbeat of the camp. Children grow up in the saddle. They learn balance before they learn letters. They learn to read weather in cloud shapes, to read distance in dust, to read danger in the sudden stillness of birds. A child can look at a horse's flank and know if it has enough strength for another day. A child can feel, without thinking, which direction the wind will push a rider. This is where the Mongols come from, not from marble halls, but from wind and necessity, not from books, but from memory and practice. And then, very suddenly in the long view of history, their world expands. The scattered clans and quarreling tribes of the steppe begin to knit together into something new, a force that would become the largest contiguous land empire the world has ever seen. At the center of that transformation is a man whose name becomes both legend and lesson, Temujin, later called Genghis Khan. If you listen closely to the stories, you can hear how the steppe forged him. He begins not as a crowned king, but as a boy marked by loss. His father dies. His family is abandoned. Hunger becomes a companion. He learns early that survival is not guaranteed by birth. It is earned. And when he gathers power, he builds it on a principle that feels simple and startling. Loyalty to the Khan matters more than loyalty to a tribe. In the old tribal world, a man fought for his clan first, and the larger confederations were fragile, held together by bargains and grudges. Temujin breaks that pattern. He shatters the old divisions and rearranges people into new units, mixing clans, mixing lineages, mixing rivals. So the old loyalty has to be replaced by a new one. Merit becomes a kind of currency. If you are capable, if you are brave, if you are reliable, you rise. If you betray, the steppe does not forgive you for long. This is part of why the Mongol armies move like a single body. They are not perfect, and they are not gentle, but they are coordinated in a way that astonishes their enemies. A rider can travel 100 miles in a day, sometimes more, changing horses as he goes. Each warrior keeps several mounts, so the herd itself becomes a moving engine of speed. They can appear where an enemy does not expect them, and vanish again like a storm breaking apart. Their warfare is not only strength, it is thinking. Horse archers can fire at full gallop, arrows humming like insects through the air. They can turn in the saddle and shoot backward while fleeing, making retreat feel like attack. They use feigned withdrawals, luring armies into open ground, pulling them away from water, away from supply, away from walls. They use scouts who ride far ahead, eyes and ears stretched over the land. They use spies and informants, learning the quarrels inside cities before they arrive at the gates. They use signals, flags by day, fires by night, haunts in full, and they use psychology with a cold understanding of the human mind. Sometimes they offer a city terms surrender and be spared, resist and be destroyed. When a city refuses and is then taken, the punishment can be terrifying. The purpose is not only revenge, it is messaging. If the next city hears what happened, perhaps it will open its gates. Fear becomes a tool, as real as a bowstring. Some chronicles describe the sound of their approach, not as one roar, but as many small noises layered together: the creak of saddles, the jingle of metal rings, the dry click of arrowheads in a quiver, the distant beat of drums used to keep time and courage. At night, they light many fires to seem more numerous, and in the morning they leave the ashes behind like a rumor. Even silence can be used as pressure, because a city that waits without knowing when the strike will come begins to exhaust itself from the inside. Yet there is another side that is easy to miss if we only listen to the loudest part, because the Mongols were not only riders on open grass. They adapted. When they reached the walls of cities, they did not simply throw themselves against stone and fail. They learned, and they borrowed, and they recruited engineers from China and Persia, craftsmen who understood wood and rope and counterweight, men who could build catapults and siege towers. They used battering rams. They used flaming arrows. They used tactics that belonged to settled warfare, but they made them move with nomadic speed. They were not just destroyers, they were strategists. They could be brutal, yes, but their brutality sat beside a practical genius. And that practical genius is what allows a paradox to emerge, quiet and steady, beneath the thunder of hooves. The Mongol Empire conquers, and at the same time it connects. Roads that were once dangerous become patrolled. The Silk Road, those long arteries between China and the Mediterranean, begins to flow more safely under Mongol protection. A merchant can travel with less fear of bandits, because bandits fear Mongol punishment. A traveler can carry a passport-like document, a peasant that signals authority and grants safe passage. Fresh horses, food, and shelter. Messages move faster. Goods move farther. Ideas move with them. In the empire, there is also a relay system, a chain of stations where fresh horses wait. A rider arrives, dust on his sleeves, and without drama he changes, mounts, and continues. News that once took months can take weeks, sometimes days, and the world feels smaller because of it. In some regions there is paper money, light as a leaf compared to metal coins, and people learn to trust the stamp of authority. There are strict laws against theft along the routes, because a road is only a road if it is safe. And when you imagine that safety, imagine lanterns in a station at night, a bowl of warm broth, the quiet stamping of horses in the dark, the soft sound of felt being shaken free of frost, silk and porcelain, spices and precious stones, furs and horses, paper and ink, medicines and stories. A Muslim merchant can speak his prayers. A Christian priest can carry his cross. A Buddhist monk can recite sutras. Religious tolerance is not perfect, but it is often practical, and that practicality keeps people moving. The empire does not belong to one single faith. It belongs to the rule that keeps the roads open. And with the goods and the ideas, other things travel too. Germs, unseen, quiet, patient, diseases that slip along trade routes like whispers. And one day, in another century, will bloom into the Black Death in Europe. Connection is never only blessing, it is also risk. But the world, once connected, rarely becomes fully unconnected again. Still, even as they rule cities, the Mongol elite remain nomads at heart. They conquer walls, but they do not fully trust walls. Many rulers prefer tents, open air, herds grazing nearby, a horizon that can be watched. They sit on power the way a rider sits on a horse balanced, ready to move, never fully rooted. This takes us to the deeper rhythm beneath all nomadic history, the balance between trade and raid. Because nomads are not isolated. They need settled goods, grain and pottery, metal tools and woven textiles, salt in certain places, spices and luxuries in others. They cannot grow everything. The steppe does not give olive oil or city-made glass. So they trade. They exchange livestock, leather, furs, salt, rare horses, falcons that can hunt like sharp wind. Trade is a bridge, and a bridge can be strong. But trade is also personal and political. It depends on respect. When a caravan crosses a border, it carries more than goods. It carries the question, do you recognize us as equal partners? Or do you see us as thieves to be cheated? If the settled rulers treat the nomads with contempt, if they refuse fair prices, if they insult ambassadors, the bridge cracks. And when the bridge cracks, the same armed convoy that could escort a caravan can also become a raiding party. One day, you are protecting merchants. The next, you are plundering the border towns that refuse to pay or try to trap you. This is not random cruelty. It is an economy of leverage. In borderlands, people understand it. They pay tribute. They offer gifts. They arrange marriages. They negotiate. Hybrid spaces form where steppe and city meet, where bribes are called fees, where diplomacy is the softest kind of defense. You can see the pattern in older nomads too. Scythians traded with Greek cities, and they also burned cities that cheated them. Bedouin tribes protected caravans when hospitality and payment were honored, and raided when honor was broken. And the Mongols, perhaps most dramatically, show how a single insult can turn trade into annihilation. There is a story that moves like a hinge in history. The Mongols attempt peaceful trade with the Khwarezmian Empire. Motions are sent. Agreements are suggested. The offer is simple: let goods pass. Let both sides profit. But the Khwarezmian authorities suspect spies, or crave the merchants' wealth, or simply wish to show dominance. They execute the merchants. They seize the goods. They break the bridge and spit on the broken stones. In a world where trade is respect, this is a declaration of war. Genghis Khan responds with a campaign so vast and so relentless that entire cities are shattered. The lesson spreads: you do not kill the messengers of the steppe and expect the steppe to forget. If you hold that paradox gently in your mind, the Mongols become clearer. Not only destroyers, not only builders, but a force that moves according to steppe logic. Trade when trade is honorable. Raid when trade is denied. Connect the world, and also remind the world that connection has rules. And now, as the story softens, imagine you are riding across the Mongolian plain. The grass bends under the wind like water under a current. The sky is vast, and it does not feel far away. It feels close, like a roof made of blue. Your horse moves steadily beneath you. A warm, living rhythm. You do not need to guide it. The horse knows the way. Behind you there are cities and empires and names written in ink. Ahead of you there is only horizon, always horizon. Let your shoulders loosen a little, as if you have set down a pack you forgot you were carrying. Let your breathing find the same slow rhythm as hoofbeats. In and out, in and out, the wind will carry you. Sleep, Rida. The steppe is wide enough to hold your thoughts until they become quiet. Almost there now. Almost at the end of our long ride. But before you go, before the fire sinks into ember and the steppe becomes only a soft idea, let me tell you what these wandering worlds left behind. In the settled world, memory is often stored in objects. Scrolls in libraries, ink on parchment, names carved into stone. But on the steppe, a library can ride on horseback. A history can live in a throat, in a tongue, in the quiet patience of an elder who knows the old lines by heart. Imagine a night camp. The wind is cool, and it moves around the jers like water around stones. Inside, the hearth glows. Outside, The horses stand with their heads low, breathing clouds of white into the dark. Somewhere a dog shifts and settles again, and in that calm circle of light, someone begins to speak. There is no printing press here. There are no shelves of books. Instead, there is a voice that has been trained the way a rider trains a horse, gently, repeatedly, with respect for rhythm. An elder recites genealogies that stretch back 12 generations, sometimes more, names linked like beads. He knows who married whom, who feuded, who forgave, who moved camp after a harsh winter, who died young, who lived long. These are not trivia. They are identity. To know your lineage is to know where you stand in the web of obligation and protection. In many nomadic cultures, proverbs carry law. A short sentence can hold a rule for life. Do not shame a guest. Do not abandon a companion in a storm. Do not steal from your own. And when disputes rise, the remembered sayings become a kind of court, spoken aloud. Waihu, applied among Bedouins. Poetry is not decoration. It is power. The sha'ir, the put, can praise a tribe into pride or shame an enemy into reckless violence. Words can start wars. Words can stop them. A verse memorized by the young becomes a rope that ties the tribe together. Among the Mongols, there is the secret history, a living saga that began as something recited, not read. It was carried from mouth to ear, meant to teach, to unify, to explain why certain loyalties mattered. Only later was it written down, like a net cast to catch a moving fish. The written version is valuable, but the oral life is what kept it alive in the first place. For the Scythians, much of what we know comes through Greek writers who listened at the edges and wrote what they could understand. That means the stories arrive already translated, already filtered, like light through colored cloth. Oral tradition always changes as it travels. Memories fade, names shift, details become symbols. Yet the advantage is that the story can adapt, can stay useful. As long as someone remembers, nothing is truly lost. It lives again each time it is spoken, warm as breath in cold air. In the oral world, listening is a skill. A child sits near the edge of the circle, pretending not to listen, and yet every word is entering them. They learn where to laugh, where to stay silent, where a name must be spoken with respect. They learn that a story is not owned by one person. It is carried by many, and each carrier adds a small shading, like dye-deepening cloth. Sometimes the elder pauses and lets the fire crackle. In that pause, the camp hears the wider night, the far call of an owl, the thin rustle of grass, the soft shifting of horses. Then the voice returns, steady as a road, and the young learn that memory is not only information, it is comfort. To know that your people survived the last harsh winter is to believe you can survive the next one. And then there are the women, so often hidden in the settled histories, and yet so present on the steppe that even the ground seems to remember them. Nomadic women are not only background figures. Mobility creates necessity, and necessity makes room for competence. Think of Scythian burial mounds. Kurgans, heavy with earth. When they are opened, archaeologists sometimes find women buried with swords and arrows, with armor, with the marks of battle on their bones, healed fractures, wounds that became scars. These were not ceremonial props. These women fought, and it is easy to see how a distant Greek listener could turn that reality into myth, into the Amazon stories, women on horseback, fierce and free, the very opposite of what Greek city life expected. In Mongol life, women manage camps, herds, supplies, and often diplomacy. When men ride to war, someone must keep the world running. A camp is not simple. It is an economy, a moving city made of felt and discipline. Women decide when to move, how to divide food, how to handle conflict, how to keep children alive through winter. And sometimes women rule directly, acting as regents, making alliances, commanding armies when needed. There is Sorgatani Beki, remembered as a strategist and kingmaker, a mind steady enough to shape the succession of an empire. Her power is not loud. It is structural, like the hidden poles that hold a tent upright. Among Bedouins, women can own property, control camels, and in some contexts, initiate divorce. Custom varies by tribe and time, but the pattern returns when life is mobile. Competence matters. A person who can ride, negotiate, and manage resources becomes important, regardless of gender. And when we speak of women again, it helps to imagine the daily fabric of a moving camp. A woman may bargain with visiting traders, weighing the honesty in their eyes. She may decide which mare is ready to foal and which child is ready to ride alone. She may stitch felt in patterns that carry clan symbols, so a tent becomes both home and flag. In a crisis, she may take command not because she wants glory, but because someone must act quickly, and she knows how. A rider's strength is often visible, but a camp's strength is often invisible. It is stored in planning, in patience, in the ability to keep many small needs balanced. That kind of power rarely becomes statue or inscription, yet it keeps people alive. There are also shamans, healers, spirit guides, often women who carry the invisible knowledge. They know herbs, they know dreams, they know the old songs that calm a frightened child and the old rituals that comfort the grieving. They stand between the living and the dead, between the ordinary and the sacred, like a bridge made of breath. If a cradle needs rocking, a woman rocks it. If a bow needs drawing, a woman draws it. Not as a slogan, but as a practical truth. The step does not reward uselessness. And what of religion, of the sacred, in a world without temples? Here, spirituality moves. Among many nomadic peoples, the land itself is holy. The sky is not a backdrop. It is a presence. Fire is not only warmth, it is a spirit you respect. Water is not only drink, it is life, and life is always near the sacred. The Scythians honored gods connected to hearth and sky, and they made offerings, sometimes of horses, those precious companions. They used smoke in rituals, herbs that altered the mind, not as entertainment, but as a doorway to guidance and trance. The Bedouins, before Islam, lived with a world full of spirits, gin in lonely places, and hospitality itself could feel like a sacred obligation, because to feed a stranger in the desert is to honor life against the indifferent sand. For the Mongols, there is Tengrism, and at its center is Tengri, the eternal blue sky. Tengri is not a god you visit in a temple. He is the sky itself, watching without walls, immense and impartial. A rider can lift his eyes anywhere on the steppe and feel that vastness above him. The sacred is portable because the sacred is everywhere. Shamans speak with spirits. They beat drums whose rhythm echoes hoofbeats. They burn juniper, letting the scent rise, sharp and clean, as if it can cut through confusion. They interpret dreams, and in an empire, dreams can become politics. Because leaders also want signs. There is also the quieter form of courage, childbirth, in a tent while the wind shakes the walls. The decision to keep moving even when grief is fresh. The calm voice that keeps a frightened group steady during a storm. These are not the scenes that poets in cities love to paint, but on the steppe they are remembered. And yet, nomadic spirituality is often adaptable. As Mongol rule stretches, Buddhism, Islam, and Christianity enter the camps. And sometimes they settle side by side. A monk, an imam, a priest can all find space under the same sky, because the sky is large, and the steppe has always taught the value of flexibility. A rigid thing breaks in the wind. A flexible thing bends and survives. So what legacy remains when you do not leave pyramids or cathedrals? More than you might think. The steppes shaped the Silk Road, keeping it alive, sometimes protecting it, sometimes shaking it awake with raids that reminded cities to respect the border. Nomads challenged the idea that only urban life is civilized. They built bridges of trade and culture. Recipes traveled. Instruments traveled. Words traveled. Under Mongol rule, technologies such as printing and administrative systems moved across continents. Not always gently, but effectively. Later, nomadic and semi-nomadic peoples would form new states, new empires, carrying steppe habits into settled power. As with Turkic groups and the long arc that leads toward the Ottomans. And there are modern echoes too. Horsemanship traditions that still live in festivals. Storytelling that still lives in families. Kinship values that still insist a guest must be fed. The reminder that no structure is permanent. The wind can erase borders on sand, and time can erase borders on maps. And what remains is the human need to belong, to be remembered, to move forward. Today, many nomadic peoples live under pressure borders. Climate shifts, urban expansion, the old routes are narrowed, the old grazing lands are fenced. Yet even so, the traditions persist in fragments, like embers carried carefully from one fire to the next. A song, a proverb, a way of sitting a horse, a way of welcoming a stranger, small things that hold a large past. And spirituality too becomes practical. A traveler ties a small strip of cloth to a branch, not to decorate, but to mark gratitude for safe passage. A family offers the first sip of milk to the earth, because the earth is the oldest host. A rider touches the mane of his horse and whispers thanks, because without that animal he is not free. Small gestures, repeated, become a kind of prayer that fits inside ordinary life. Even the sky has moods. On clear nights it is a deep velvet, and the stars feel near enough to touch. On storm nights, clouds move like herds, and lightning flickers behind them, silent from a distance. A nomad learns to read those moods the way a sailor reads waves. The sacred is not separate from weather. It is braided into it. The steppe people remind us that history is not only made in palaces. It is made on roads, in camps, in markets, in the long spaces between settled places. It is made by those who carry news, by those who guard caravans, by those who decide whether a border will be a bridge or a wound. And if you are still listening, still breathing slowly, let yourself feel the gentleness beneath it all. A blanket of felt, a bowl of warm milk, a story spoken into darkness, a horse standing quietly, patient as stone, a sky so wide it makes personal worries feel smaller, not because they do not matter, but because the world is large enough to hold them. And now the fire burns low, the stars wheel overhead, patient and bright. You have ridden with queens and merchants and poets. You have drifted through medieval shadows and across endless grass. You have heard how love can be negotiated, how trade can become war, how memory can become a library. These stories are not only old tales. They are maps of the human heart, of what it means to be free, to be fierce, to be remembered. Tomorrow you will wake in your own world, with its screens and schedules and quiet, modern rules. But tonight, in your mind, you rode the steps, and the wind carried your name. Good night, traveler. Good night, warrior. Good night, dreamer. Sleep deeply. Sleep well. The horizon waits for no one. But tonight, you rest, and that is enough. Good night.